head over to miniaturemarket.com where they have thousands of board games at discounted prices like Marvel Champions. Hello my friends, it's the Game Boy Geek here. Today we're going to be diving right into the Marvel Universe and being heroes like Iron Man, Spider-Man, She-Hulk, Captain Marvel, and the Black Panther. But we'll also be their alter egos trying to take out schemes and villains. Today we're going to be taking a look at Marvel Champions. This is the new living card game, also known as LCG, from Fantasy Flight Games. It was their big announcement at Gen Con. I've got a chance to play this, so I'm going to show you how the game's played, and I'll see you on the other side for my final thoughts. In Marvel Champions, you're going to be cooperatively working together as heroes like Black Panther, Iron Man, She-Hulk, Captain Marvel, and Spider-Man. You're going to be trying to take out and thwart schemes of villains like Rhino, Claw, and Ultron. But throughout the game, you'll also be acting as their alter egos, which will give you different strategies throughout the game. Now I'm going to show you how the game works with just a solo setup, just so the basics can be taught easily. Each hero is going to start as their alter ego and with a certain amount of hit points depending on the card. They're also going to get a hand size to start the game. In this case, it's 6 cards from their deck. Now, each hero has their own starter deck, which I'm going to be showing you here, but I'll also talk about customization later in the video. Now here we have Rhino as the villain. There's actually 2 levels of Rhino in this game. He'll get stronger after you kind of beat him up a little bit. And he'll start with a certain amount of hit points depending on the amount of players. It's basically 14 per player. We're playing with just one hero, so it's set at 14. Also a starter deck for Rhino, and you can customize these as well. And there's a scheme here. And over the course of the game, threat is going to be placed on here. And if this threat ever matches the amount here, which is 7 threat per player. In this case, we're playing with just one player, so 7 threat, and we will lose. There's 2 ways to lose the game. If this threat ever gets to 7, because we're just playing with one hero, we would lose. Or if Spider-Man's health ever gets to 0, we would lose. Well, how we win is defeating Rhino by essentially getting all his hit points down, and then he'll come back a little bit stronger, and we'll have to do the same thing again before those other things happen. And that's how we would win. Now, Peter Parker has a hand size of 6, so here's the 6 cards. Now, in the beginning of the game, you can actually discard some cards and drop back up for a mulligan at the beginning of the game, but let's just say these are the 6 cards we have. Now, on your turn, basically the game goes through different flows. There's a player phase and then a villain phase. In the player phase, each player in turn order is going to be playing cards, taking actions and such, and all players will do that in clockwise order from the start player. Then the villain will have a phase. But since we're just one hero, we're going to go through the player phase and do some different things. So one thing you could do is play cards. Now the cost of the cards is in the upper left of this. So if I want to play this, I have to pay 1. And what you're paying is resources. Resources are on the bottom left. Most cards have 1 resource. Other cards will sometimes have multiple resources. Most of the time you can pay any resource for a cost, but sometimes when you activate things, it might need a specific type of resource. So in order to play this card, I've got to spend 1. So let's just use this card as this resource. We would discard this into our discard pile, and then we would go ahead and play this. Now speaking of resources, the 4 different ones are mental, physical, energy, and if it's a star, it's wild. Now this card was an upgrade, so it kind of goes to the right of my deck here, and this allows me to put 3 counters on here, and then essentially what I can do is I can exhaust this, which is putting it sideways like this, and I can remove one of these counters to generate a wild resource. So if I need to get some more cards out of my hand, I can't quite pay for them, I can use this, but only using these here once per round essentially. Now this card is a special card for Spider-Man, and it's going to do a lot of damage, 8 damage to an enemy. It's huge. So let's go ahead and activate that. We need to cost us 3, so we're going to actually spend these 3 cards out of our hand into our discard pile to pay the 3 resources to play this event. So I just placed this card here to show you that the hero acts as an attack. You deal 8 damage to the enemy. So Rhino level 1 only has 6 health left, and then this would, since it's an event, it goes just right to my discard pile. Now there's different things you can do on your turn. You can do them in any order. I just happen to have played 2 cards, but you can also, sometimes cards will have actions that you can use, and sometimes you can do things with your character. For example, as the Peter Parker alter ego, I could resource. I could generate one of those resources once per round and just generate to help pay for a card. But I've kind of done all those cards. Now once per round you can flip to the other side. Now here I am now flipped to the hero side, Spider-Man. Now Spider-Man has an ability which is called Interrupt. When the villain initiates attack against you, you get to draw a card. That's cool. Now each hero has 3 things. They have Thwart, Attack, and Defense. Attack is simply going to be attacking the villain. Thwarting is going to be trying to stop their schemes. And defensive, of course, is when the villain attacks you. Now in this case, let's go on the attack, the offensive here. We're going to go ahead and attack for 2. So when we do that, we're going to exhaust this, and we're going to attack 2. And so that's going to bring them from 6 to 4. We were lucky we got that really great swinging web kick. Now we got them pretty low even just in the first round, but remember, you're going to have to go through 2 different levels of these, and as you'll see, it ratchets up the tension as the game goes on. Now at this point, let's just say I am done. I don't want to do anything else on my turn. We would then go, and then it would go to the next player's turn if there was one. They would do all their actions and such. Once all the players are done, each player is going to discard any number of cards that they still have in their hand that they want to. Then they're going to draw up to their hand size. Now the hand size is going to be different. It's only like, for this example, it's 5 if I'm on the Spider-Man side and 6 on the Peter Parker side. And different heroes have different limits and such. And then you'd ready up all your cards. So essentially you'd be sort of fresh for the villain phase about to happen. Now the villain's going to start by putting an amount of threat based upon here. This says 1 per player at the beginning of each villain phase. So I'm going to put 1. Remember, if this gets to 7, we immediately lose. Then the villain's going to activate onto each player in player order. Now this is interesting with the choice. If I'm a hero, the villain will attack us, or Spider-Man in this case. If I was Peter Parker, the alter ego, the villain would then scheme, trying to get that scheme all the way up. So let's show you an example of both. So let's say here. So what happens is the villain's going to take a card off the top of their deck, and they're just going to look at a boost value. This one has a boost value of 2. So this is going to get discarded, but that boost value of 2 gets added to the attack value of this Rhino. So it's 2 plus 2, so it's doing 4 damage against Spider-Man. So that's going to take Spider-Man from 10 all the way down to 6. Now, before he attacked, we would have a chance to defend. Now, if you remember, we readied this before this phase for this reason. So instead of this going down from 10 to 6, we could have defended with Spider-Man, which would have taken 3 of the 4 damage. We would have only gone down 1. If we didn't want to defend, other players could actually exhaust their character and defend for us. Now let's say we decide to defend. Now typically you'd actually have to decide that before you flip over that encounter card to see how much boost they get. But just for an example, I'm showing you how that might work. So we would have defended this, we would have 9, but now Spider-Man's exhausted, so he won't be able to attack or thwart next round. Now speaking of health, you can play cards that will help you gain health, but also if you're on your alter ego, you can exhaust them to gain or recover, REC, that much health. Now, if Spider-Man was the alter ego, instead of attacking Spider-Man, it would have, against Peter Parker, would have schemed. And how that would have worked is the same thing. This would have come up, it would have been a boost of 2, and you would have added it to his scheme. So it would have been 2 plus 1 is 3. You would have added 3's scheme here, and again, once you get to 7, you lose. So it's interesting how they do different things depending on what form your hero's in. Then once the hero sort of activates each player is going to get one of these encounter cards, and it's going to essentially, resolve for each player. So for example, this is a Stampede, and it says, when revealed, if I'm a hero, which I am, Rhino attacks you. If the character is damaged by this attack, the character is stunned. So yes, his attack strength was 2, so this brings me down to 7, and now I'm stunned. So this gives me a little thing here. It says the next time this character would attack, discard this status card instead. Wow, that really stinks. And then this would just get discarded. But sometimes a side scheme will come out instead, and this will do different things. Like when revealed, we place an additional +1 threat. So what this means is that for all the additional rounds, now it's going to get 2 at the beginning, and essentially this is going to start to get threat as well. And you'll have to start, working off, trying to get this off, to get this off, then to get this off. And so different sort of side schemes can come out throughout the game. Now sometimes the card that you get encountered with is a minion. This one will attach to you, and essentially this, every villain phase, this specific minion is also going to scheme or attack against you as well as the villain. And it really makes it a lot harder, but minions can be defeated by you, and it's a cooperative game, and so other heroes can actually help defeat this minion for you. And here it shows you how much hit points that has, and it tells certain things. So minions are really bad. And after each player has sort of resolved their encounter cards, past the first player marker, which looks like this, and then you'd start that all over again. Again, you're trying to make sure that not all heroes get eliminated, because if so, you all lose. And so you're trying to defeat all the levels of the villain before either the scheme gets all the way to level or everyone's eliminated. Now, if you did get this down to 0, this would come out. You'd get new hit points. In this case, it'd be 15 per player. And then this bad event comes out, and it's a little bit stronger. So you basically have to beat them a different amount of levels depending on your specific scenario. Now let's talk about the decks and the construction and customization. Now, I told you it came with, we used a starter deck. Now there's all configurations for starter decks for each of the 5 heroes, and those decks are made up of different things. One, it's made up of specific cards for that hero. Now there's a lot more cards in the deck than this, but there's a lot of duplicates, and some of the cards I already showed you earlier. But here's some of the specific cards for Spider-Man. If you'd like to pause and read all this, you can go ahead and do that now. Now, another interesting thing is each hero has their own Nemesis, and these cards, certain things will bring these cards out, and there'll be side schemes based upon that specific Nemesis, and that will bring out certain minions that they'll have to fight, sometimes treachery cards. So it's interesting that there's some cards that will come out specific for each hero at different times throughout the game during the villain phase. There's also an obligation for each character or hero. So here, the eviction notice, no matter who gets this in the villain phase, they'll have to give it to the Peter Parker player, and then bad things will happen they get to choose from. Now, each hero's deck also has what's called an aspect, and they're all paired with one specifically to start with. Like, for example, these are all yellow cards that say Justice, because that's Spider-Man's aspect. And here's all the unique cards that are in that specific part of the deck. You can pause here to read these if you like. Now, all of the other heroes come with some of these as well, but with the customization, you can simply change out the aspect to one of the other ones, and you can have a different deck, and that's the easiest way to customize. And with 5 heroes and 4 aspects, there's 20 different combinations you can play without even doing a full customization of your decks. And each hero will start with a handful of these gray basic cards. Now, I didn't show you this earlier, but sometimes cards can come out and they're actually allies, and they come out for you, and they're next to you, and then what happens is you can use these to thwart or attack as well, but they actually take some damage, and they do some certain things, and these can actually help defend for you when you get attacked as well, and they'll get eliminated. But there's different things, and there's also support and things like that, but those are different types of cards that's in a deck. Now, here are the specific cards for the Black Panther. Hopefully I've zoomed in enough that you can read this. If you'd like to, you can pause it here. And here are unique sets of cards for the Iron Man deck. Again, feel free to pause and read through them. And here are the unique cards from the She-Hulk deck. Again, you can pause if you want to read through them. And finally, for the heroes, here are the cards from the Captain Marvel deck. Now, we talked about the 4 different aspects, and Spider-Man started with Justice by default. The other ones are Protection, Aggression, and Leadership, and these will be mixed into some of the other starter decks with the different heroes. And again, you can mix these up with different heroes for a slight customization, which will definitely change the way the decks play. But you can also do a fully customized deck where you take a specific hero, you take their hero cards, and you take any one aspect and you take the card from that. You can mix in some of the different basics and things like that. So there are different ways that you can sort of fully customize decks. And the last couple things is they do have a nice book that has it's not the rules, but it's just an index or a sort of a glossary. And you look up certain terms, and then in the book itself, it has the details of everything that has to do with that. I have had to use this quite a bit, and it's very useful. Now, one of the odd things about this is obviously they have this set up so you can put a bunch of decks in. It's built for a lot of expansions, but the cards, they go and they kind of sit here, and I assume that these are supposed to sort of like sit as a deck like this, and then there's supposed to be some sort of separator, but I did not see any separators in my copy. I'm not sure if this was an error or if it's just because I have one of the very early copies, but I hope that this comes with separators. If not, it's definitely a negative. I'm not sure what this is used for if you don't have separators to put here. All right, well, there's Marvel Champions. Now, I'm going to preface this by saying I'm going to be willing to bet that the majority of the people watching this video like Marvel or even love Marvel, to the point where having this be a Marvel theme is a positive thing for probably the majority of you. I do not fall in that majority. I've watched Marvel movies here and there, but I don't watch them all. I'm not like super into them. For me, I don't dislike Marvel, but it's not something that I see something that has Marvel attached and I'm instantly gravitated to that. So for me, the theme and the intellectual property here is indifferent for me. It's not a plus, it's not a minus. So keep that in mind, but my first positive is it has a strong intellectual property. For many of you, this is gonna be a huge thing. For me, it's okay. I like how it comes through. I like how the thematics of each of the characters sort of make sense with, even with the starter decks of, Justice with Spider-Man taking out the schemes and She-Hulk having aggression and things like that. I like that they brought the characters to life. I like that their cards do what they typically do, and they match them with aspects. So the strong intellectual property here is definitely a positive, even though it doesn't really make me go crazy. I like the cooperative aspect of this because you're helping each other out, and there's different ways you can do that. you can do it by defending each other. So hey, someone's gonna get hit, you know what, I'll defend for you and exhaust my character to defend you because you don't have that great at defense. This is gonna be a big hit and I'm great at defense. Also, if you're fighting minions for others, those minions are a pain in the butt. And to be able to fight them for other players is a big deal because minions really mess up the game for you in a bad way. So I like that cooperative aspect of it. The other cooperative aspect is being able to use actions on others' turns. That's cool too, is that you can, you know, exhaust and use an action to help somebody else out on their turn. I like that as well. The cooperative aspect, I love cooperative games and I like how you are working together here with this. Now, throughout the game, you know, you're choosing your hero or the alter ego. And I love this aspect of the game because you're gonna have different, there's a lot to think about because you can only do it once per round. And you know that once you're flipped at the end of the round, that's gonna decide how that villain is going to interact with you. You know, if you flip and then recover as your alter ego, you know he's gonna scheme, but you don't wanna do that if the scheme is almost about to hit the limit to lose the game. So you might need to stay on your hero side and take more damage, have others help you. It's just, it seems simple like, oh, I'll just flip this and I'll attack. But there's a lot more thought that needs to go in towards the end of the game as to what side, you know, sometimes you're like, okay guys, and gals, we need this round to really all stay on the hero side because we can't allow them to scheme this round, you know? And I know it's gonna be tough. Let's all focus on healing each other and stuff like that. Or it might be the opposite, where it's like, hey, we're all almost dead here. Let's try to see if we can recover and stay on this other side and let the scheme go up because we've got some room, some margin for error there. It's such a cool decision in the game, and I like that aspect of it. The coolest part about this is the tension and the choosing of which cards to spend as resources, because you can't do everything, but you want to. And I love that feeling in games where you're like, oh man, I want to do this and this, but I can't. I've really got to choose. What is the #1 priority thing? This card? What do I have to get up to give it? Oh, I don't want to give up all this. I can do this one card, or I could possibly do these 2 cards. And so what should I do? And try and decide what to do, and then even what to keep at the end of the round. Do I want to keep this card for later? It's a great card, but it's really gonna clog up my hand. And you know what? The thing that this card does, it's great, but we're not really in like a pinch for that right now. I'm gonna discard it and try to get something I can really use now. And a lot of that are the great decision points in this game. The heroes having a nemesis is really cool. Each one has one, and sometimes it comes out, and it totally screws you over. Now, there will be some games that none of them come out, right? It depends on the scenario you're playing, the encounter deck you have, and how the cards come out. In the last game, none of them came out that I played. But sometimes they'll, you know, they will come out. So, but I like how they do that. It's thematic and it makes sense, and it really throws a wrinkle in your plans. I like that. I like that you can just sort of get started with the starter decks for beginners, where you're just like, okay, here it is. And for most of the time, I think I'll probably play with the starter decks as well. Just because I like knowing the decks and knowing what's coming, but I'll also sort of mix in the different aspects as well. I probably will never go like full customization, which I'll get to in just a moment, but I do like that they have those starter decks, at least for beginners, to quickly get started. I've got some negatives to that too that I'll talk about in just a moment when I get to that section of the review. Mixing the different aspects with the heroes, as I just sort of led to. I like that there's different levels of customization. You can be like, okay, I want this character, and this character usually plays with aggression, but let's try justice this time. And you can just swap that out. And I like that it will give your deck a different feel. If you're always playing with that character, play with the 4 different aspects, it'll give it a different feel. That means with the 5 heroes and the 4 aspects, there's 20 different combinations that you can play with just quick and easy semi-customization before going into full customization, which you might never want to do, which is another positive that for those that want to study. Now, when you fully customize, you have to use all cards from one aspect, but you get to choose which cards. Maybe you choose both of the same cards of that aspect. Maybe you leave one out and you get something else. So you get to do that, you know, a certain range of number of cards you can have, things like that. I'll probably never do this, but some people probably will, and it's a positive there. People that play cooperative games sometimes talk about an alpha player or quarterbacking, where people can just tell people what to do. This game completely removes that. So if you're one of those players that don't like co-op games because of that, check this game out, because all players have their cards and they're looking at what they're looking at, and they just, you know, they're making their own decisions, and you don't really know what they have in their hand. Now, granted, you can tell people what you have in your hand and how you can help, but you don't have to until it's really necessary. So this takes that out of there, and I think that's going to help a lot of players in the co-ops. I've never had that problem, but some players do, and this will help that. It's a living card game, LCG, so new packs are going to be coming out regularly. I think up for pre-order along with this game is the Green Goblin pack, which I think comes with like 3 new scenarios to play with. That's really cool. So overall, again, at the beginning of this review, I said that I didn't really care about Marvel, and let's hold off a little bit on my final thoughts. So negative, a little teaser there. First of all, a couple of production things. I showed at the end of the video the insert. It is set up nicely to have a bunch of sets of cards. It's made for a ton of expansions, you can tell, and there's no way to separate out the cards. Are you kidding me? Well, what is this? You give me this great insert for all these things, and you kind of tease me that I can put the cards in there, but you don't include ways to separate out the cards? And I did contact the publisher, and they told me, well, no, that's it. You just need to use your own ways to separate it. I'm like, who does that? I don't get it. You've got this game that is this big thing, and you're going to have tons of ways to get new cards, and there's no way to separate them? So I just don't get that. Why were there no separators? You had punch boards, just put some in there to do it. Negative here for me. Another production hiccup, there's a lot of tokens and not one bag. Like today, these days, you open up a board game and sometimes there's like 20 bags in there to put all the tokens in. Not one extra bag for all these tokens? Come on, Fantasy Flight. What are you doing? Add that in there. Got to call you out on that one. Okay, so another big thing. If you're playing with the starter decks, you can't play with Iron Man and She-Hulk by default with their starter decks because they both use the aggression aspect. And it might not sound like a big deal, but it's like, oh, okay, like even just last night, one player wanted to play Iron Man, one player wanted to play She-Hulk. It was their first time playing. And I said, well, can you guys pick someone else? Because now you can't play with them, but you got to take Spider-Man's Justice deck out and put it in to substitute. And then it's like, okay, well, then it's not really their starter deck, really. And so you can't play with Iron Man, She-Hulk, and Spider-Man together unless you circumvent somebody else's. And I don't like that. This is a pretty expensive game. It's worth it, by the way, but a pretty expensive game for just cards. I would have really loved them to have enough cards to play with everybody there. It's kind of a pain in the butt, but it's a negative there. Playtime. I like this game best with 1 or 2 players. The solo game works great. In fact, as this video goes up, I am in tandem putting up a solo playthrough with Spider-Man. And I'll put the link to that in the description below, and I'll try to remember to put the little eye up in the corner here right now that you can click and go to that playthrough. You'll see me play through an entire game, and it only took me about 25 minutes because I edited it down, but showed you some cool things. 1 or 2 players. 2 players is my favorite because you have the player interaction, but you don't have any downtime. 3 players works fine. The downtime is a little noticeable, but it's not detrimental. With 4 players, if you're the first player, you're going to take your turn and do all your stuff. Then 3 other players are going to do that. And sometimes it takes a while. I'm going to play this and do this. I'm going to activate this. I'm going to do this and get another resource. I'm going to play a card. I'm going to hit this person over here. Sometimes the turns can take a little while. And then after all that happens, then you've got the villain that's going to come around and do all that stuff. But then when you start the next round, the start player token goes. So you're going to have 1, 2, 3 players play after you, and then 1, 2, 3 players play in the next round's phase. So that's 6 turns before you get to play again with 4 players. It's too much downtime. I would recommend this game for 2 or 3 players. And if you like solo, the solo works great. My favorite is 2. So 4 players, too much downtime. So that being said, I pointed out a lot of negatives, but and that I don't really care that much about the theme, but I really love this game. I love card games. I love card games with interesting choices, tough decisions, good card play. This has that. Obviously, it's set up for a lot of expandability. For all the reasons I've mentioned, I am absolutely keeping this. It's getting my highest honor, which is a saxophone serenade, which means I'm keeping this game in my gaming library, which is tough because when I keep a game, I got to get rid of a game. So that's hard. So I'm going to induct it properly with a saxophone serenade. This has been the Game Boy Geek, breaking down barriers, growing relationships through board games by helping you find the next one you'll love. And by the way, this is up for pre-order right now. If you're watching this when this video comes out, there's a link below to purchase this at Miniature Market. If you're watching it in the future, hey, it might already be out. You can do the same. Did you miss the Game Topper 2.0 Kickstarter? Have no fear, it's not too late to get in on the ultimate gaming accessory. Convert your table into a high-quality gaming table with a fully portable Game Topper system and take advantage of some of the best 3mm premium gaming mats in the industry. New styles, new sizes, and new accessories can be yours. Upgrade every game you play by late backing now at GameToppersLLC.com.